Summary of the business meeting. Well, actually the first thing to summarize is this being the November meeting, tonight is elections. And we have, remarkably, full ticket. Even though he tried to get out of it, Doug Hawking will stand one more year as sheriff. Liz Severn has volunteered to be deputy sheriff with the idea in mind that she is apprenticing to be sheriff. I'll hang on as ink slinger, doing our publications. Recorder of remarks and brands is Gene Smith, who couldn't be here tonight. Keeper of the chips, Deborah Lewis. Okay. Trail boss, Bob Spalley. Roundup foreman, Gary Smith. Corral rep remains Debbie. It's a multi-year position, and so she's there. And I will hang on as statutory agent unless somebody wants to learn how to do that. It's not hard. So that is the ticket that we have managed to put together. We can vote the ticket, or if someone is interested in taking an office, you can volunteer now and we'll have a runoff election. Is anyone interested in holding office? Okay, there being no show of hands here. All those in favor of the ticket as presented, please so signify by raising your hand and saying aye, and Madam Recorder, please get a count. All those in favor so signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. It would appear to be anonymous. Okay, and Deborah Lawson is going to help us out as telegrapher. Bounty trader remains Karen. These are not elected positions. Bartender remains Donna. Wrangler, thank God we've got him. Fred. He puts together all our electronic equipment, gets the building open for us. And really, folks, give him a round of applause because he deserves it. Okay, in the business meeting, we paid $216.32 toward our website. That'll be less next year. This year it was a little higher because we were collecting money through the website for the gather. We also bought a banner. Actually, we bought two banners for the Tombstone Festival of Western Books, which is going to be Friday, March 8th. And yes, the city will hang these of Allen Street. They're double-sided. And there we go. You want to get a photo? There you go. Okay. All righty. Bob, can I talk you into rolling that up? Yeah. Good. And then I can get on with things. There you go. Okay, what else? And we paid for the insurance for the Tombstone Festival of Books. We also got, that was $221, something the city's requiring. Fortunately, they're not requiring it for our meetings. We have registered to have the building during the festival and for our meetings. There you go. That's going to get too heavy for her pretty soon. Okay. And That's pretty much what came out of the business meeting.
Okay. The news and stuff, that's where you're reading announcements.
My announcements. Thank you. Okay. This being the season that it is, it's when we start paying our dues. See Jimmy to pay dues for next year for 2024. They're only $20. So far, we haven't had to raise them. So get in there fast, because if we do raise them, well, if you paid already, you're covered. Okay, see Karen. Karen. Stand, wave. There you are. Karen is selling tickets for the raffle. What have you got on the raffle tonight?
And some Christmas ornaments if you need them for your trees. And it's $1 for one ticket or $5 for 6. 2 or 12.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and the pony up jar. Aha. For members only and not for visitors. If you do not wear your western tonight, you own the jar of larger one. No, pass that jar to the young lady. All right. The columns of the Fremont Street Mail are open to you folks to contribute. It would be very nice if you did. If you've been someplace special, send us a few photos and a couple of paragraphs. I'm looking for articles for the Border Vedette. I don't know. I think he ought to pay about $1. Look at how he's dressed. Look like you're from Alabama or something. Okay. And finally, we have maps for sale, maps of the tombstone claims. They're out in the lobby. They're for sale for $5. Very nice map. And we have the commemorative Gather mugs, only $12. And so if you like a mug, all right. Senior Trail Boss, what have you got for us?
Well, we got our 4 trips in this year, and if you guys didn't go on them, you missed some good trips. Got one out to Denny last time. It was definitely a really good trip. Got a few things lined up. Probably won't do them until maybe after the first of the year, but thinking about doing another Tombstone walk. If you guys didn't go on Tombstone Territory Rendezvous last week, Nancy took us on a walk. There was 240 gunfights within like a mile or 2 radius, and 40 of them right on this street. So she did just the 40 on this street. So we're thinking about doing something like that. Doug turned me on. There's a gal, Bonnie, that comes to here that owns the Duquesne Ghost Town. So thinking about doing that next year. A lot of cool stuff has happened there. Rancho de la Oso might be in the works. I just found out it is like a 3-hour drive, so we might not do that one. And then maybe even doing a Bisbee mine tour in the Bisbee Hotel. Doug got a connection for the Bisbee Hotel and says we could go into places. They still do the chink chink with electricity, the big switches and everything. So that might be a cool thing. And if you guys got any suggestions or think any of these stores are good, I'm always open for suggestions and stuff. So let me know, but keep your calendars open because we got some good stuff coming up.
Thank you. Okay, Senior Roundup Foreman. You've got some good things coming.
Good evening. Upcoming stuff. January we'll have the history of the Arizona Rangers. February we'll have Spanish-Apache relations. And March we'll have a presentation by Janet Sands. She's a sheriff of another corral, but her husband, if you've heard of Sands Ranch, he's part of that family. So some good stuff there. For December, for our poetry, music, storytelling event, that'll start normally at 7, and we're asking folks bring a snack to share with everybody. We're going to start off with about 30 minutes of music by Carol Markstrom, an award-winning singer from Tucson. After intermission, we'll have poems and short stories. And I hope you all will participate. It's for the members to participate. You can read a poem. If you have your own original work, that's fine. We'll do that for about an hour, and then we'll have a raffle for a Christmas basket. Also, I am putting together a speakers list for next year. So if you know of good speakers, or you go to another presentation and you hear a good speaker, get a hold of me, and I'll see if I can get them on the list. But I really would, I think we can have a lot of fun in December. It's just something we're going to try. We've had folks throughout the year do a lot of poems, and I thought, let's just have a poetry storytelling night with some music. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm to labor further.
This weekend over the Empire Range, Saturday and Sunday is the...
She's got it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. We're not in September. Oh, just a minute. Do I have just a minute. I think I had the wrong one. Okay. November 4th and 5th, is this the Saturday and Sunday, is the Cowboy Festival at Empire Ranch. They have lots of, demonstrations, blacksmith, all kinds of vendors, all kinds of talks. Doug is speaking himself at 12 o'clock on Saturday, and mining, and 10 o'clock on the Hi-Fi Gang, and plus they have food there and all kinds of great demonstrations. Beef Troop is normally there, and all kinds of other places. That's.
Is she going to be there?
I'm going to be there. Oh, Deborah Lawson, yes, she's going to be. Oh, you're not going to be there? I know, I get you too. Deborah Lewis is going to be there selling her books also. And by the way, I have her whole series, and I'm starting the second volume in about a couple days, and it's wonderful. I love her Western fiction series. So, okay, Monday, November 5th, right after Empire Ranch, Doug and I are going to go to Maricopa to do Southwest train robberies talk. November 11th and 12th in Tucson Expo Center is the Native Treasure Show. Lots of different Indians and stuff, plus Doug and I will be there with his books too. November 13th at 12:50, but this is closed though for everyone. Doug's speaking at a layman academy for children, but okay. November 15th at the Catalina Corral in Tucson. Doug speaking at the exploits of the High Five Gang at 11:30. Cowboy Christmas in Mescal. If anyone was planning to go the 2 days after Thanksgiving, they had to cancel because of filming a movie there. Yeah. Okay, November 18th, again at the Presidio San Agustin in Tucson. Doug is speaking on Southwest train robberies. December 3rd, Cochise County Historical Society Annual Banquet. This is on the Gadsden Hotel. Karen?
You didn't bring up the meeting, you need to pay our dues.
Oh, yeah, just a minute. Oh, yeah, I gave you the envelope for that, to pay dues for that. Jimmy. Karen? Yeah, you can bring a guest, but you have to, of course, remember to pay. Anyway, so Jimmy is going to pay our dues for them, from this corral to the Cochise County Historical. They always have a great menu. December 9th at Empire Ranch is also Christmas at the ranch. Okay. Do you want me to stay up here and do this?
No, let's find out. Corral, right?
Oh, I am the clerk. That's me again.
That's you again.
Yes.
Where can they go back and look at? Are they on the website or all the things you brought up?
Yeah, Doug will do it.
They will be in the Fremont Street Mail, and it comes out on Tuesday.
And also, if you'd like, I can give you this copy.
Okay.
Because we can get more copies on the computer, so I'll give it to you. Just remind me, please. Okay. The quarterly of the Oregon California Trails Association Overland Journal, the newest one that just came out, has a great article on the Southern Trail into California on Kearny's Trail. Early in the Mexican-American War of 1846, General Stephen Ross Kearny was ordered to march along a large army overland to the Mexican province of Nueva Mexico. After seizing New Mexico for the United States, he was to divide his army into three parts. One part would march down to Mexico to supplement American forces already fighting for Texas there, and another part would journey west to conquer Alta California, and the third would stay in New Mexico as an occupation force. Anyway, it's a great quarterly. You do have to join Southern Trail, the Oregon Trail, to get the quarterly, though. Okay, and the last one, the newest True West magazine, came out with a review by Doug on a book called Terror in the West. Page 52, if anyone has gets the magazine. And an article on the 10 U.S. Marshals and Deputy U.S. Marshals who defined the legendary West. Some of the names are Wyatt Earp, Patrick Garrett, Bass Reeves, I'm not going to name all of them, Wild Bill Hickok, Bat Masterson, Seth Bullock, and others. So it's a great article in the newest True West. And that's it.
Thank you. And make sure Jimmy gets these.
The envelope I gave you.
Yeah. Now, is there any time it's cowboy poetry tonight? Oh, tomorrow? And Bob does too.
Good evening. I thought I'd pick something of the upcoming seasons coming close. It's called 14 Below. The gauge on the barn says it's 14 below. I have my own gauge. It's my right little toe. Whenever it gets around 14 below, my toe starts akin like nothing you know. It seems to be telling me to stay around the house, to muck out the stalls, or spend time with my spouse. But when the gauge on the barn starts to rise just a bit, I know what that means. I've got to get with it. To rend to the chores to get the stock fed, work never seems to be done around this old man's spread. So whenever it gets around 14 below and Old Man Winter brings 2 feet of snow, I know my old gauge is right there as well to give me an excuse to just sit, be a spell.
This one's called the Wild West. The Wild West was a scary place where many a cowboy was laid to rest. There were Injuns and outlaws and killings galore, but the prospect of silver made 'em come back for more. Tombstone was king for a few short years. Many a widow has shed a few tears. Men go crazy when they see a rich vein and rush out west on the fastest freight train. A boomtown pops up and it brings out the worst, keeping the man busy drying a horse-drawn hearse. There were fights in the streets and fights in the bars. If you were looking for trouble, no need to go far. But it also brought elegance and a lot of good food, even champagne to brighten your mood. So in the West, you could strike it rich or end up buzzard bait lying in a ditch.
Okay. We have a 1-minute history. And Bob, don't take off with my notes. I think that's them.
Minutes up.
You didn't even set it up yet, Frick. You all may know that we went over to Columbus and Hatchita on our trip over by Deming and Cook's Canyon. And when we got there, we found some pieces of equipment. And to talk about them, I kind of got to start by explaining what a cannon, a howitzer, and a mortar are. A cannon is direct fire. Fires on a relatively flat trajectory. You can see here a naval cannon. Those ropes are tied to the side of the ship, and that's what absorbs recoil. The thing runs back against the side of the ship. Now, a howitzer displaces recoil into its trail. And in consequence, it moves a little bit off target every time you fire it. It fires relatively high angle. That's why it's a howitzer and not a cannon. And finally, you've got the mortar, which displaces recoil directly into the ground, firing on a very high trajectory. Why is any of that important? These are the weapons we fought with all through, the 19th century. But in the early 20th century, the French developed the French 75, and we found one over at Columbus. Now, the beauty of the French 75, on which all modern cannon are based, all howitzers, is that recoil mechanism that you see under the barrel. It's basically a big shock absorber. And this made cannon in tanks possible because you couldn't displace the fire anywhere. So you displace it into that shock absorber. So kind of neat to see it there. The thing's still set up with 4 seats and set to be at this point horse drawn. And the crew hops on the seats and away they go. So the other thing we found was one of the earliest armored vehicles. This one was equipped to carry a machine gun and a turret, an early version of the tank. It's really an armored personnel carrier meant to stop small arms and fragmentation. It's not meant to stop cannon fire. Oh my. Which tells us that the operation by General Pershing was the first combined arms operation of the 20th century. He had armor. He had airplanes that were doing reconnaissance for him and crash landing almost every day. He had infantry, artillery, truck supply, and we saw the last American cavalry charge. So he had all those arms working together, a real army. And that was kind of neat. So, how'd I do, Fred? Did I stay under 3 minutes? Close. Okay. And with that, I guess let's take a break.
Gives me a great pleasure to introduce our presenter tonight, Mike Anderson. He's going to have a very entertaining presentation. Well, let's see. He's been a resident of Arizona since 1961. I think that was before statehood, right? He's taught Arizona history, world geography, world history as a high school social studies teacher. Author of The Warren Ballpark. If you've ever been there and watched their old-time baseball games, it's really neat. He's had articles in Arizona Frontier Peace, in Arizona Frontier on peace officers, been published in the Journal of Arizona History, and he's had numerous articles appearing in the Cochise County Historical Journal. Please welcome Mike Anderson.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right? Y'all hear me in the back, in the cheap seats? Okie doke. I was trying to think about how to introduce this tonight because it's an entertaining topic. Hope this doesn't distract anybody while I speak here. I was trying to figure out how to introduce this particular topic because it's not your typical Arizona history. It's not your typical Western history topic. You walk around Tombstone, the theme here is violence and gunfights and all the attendant things that go with it. But tourists don't stop in. They don't come into this building. They don't pay much attention to it. They drive by it. They walk by it. They may think to themselves, this is an interesting place. It's kind of a cool looking place, but I don't think it gets a lot of attention. And yet, of all the places in this town where history took place, this is one of the most interesting of all. Where you're sitting tonight is where people 120 years ago, 130 years ago, 140 years ago watched world-class entertainment. And tonight what we're going to take a look at is how people entertained themselves and how they were entertained during the early days of southern Arizona. And if anybody's got any questions, observations, complaints, let me know if you're going to throw something so I can duck. But I'm happy to entertain questions throughout this. And with no further ado, let's get started. This cover slide here, these are the Wallace sisters. They were a comedy act that appeared here in January 1882. So if you'd had $1 or $1.50 at that time, you could have come in here and watched these ladies and they would have had you laughing until you peed your pants. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight, is providing amusement and also how people, entertainment. Entertainment is something that you do for pleasure. It's something you do for fun. It's something you do to amuse yourself or to amuse others or for other people to amuse you. We all have our own forms of entertainment, the things that we like to do. It was a lot harder to find entertainment 140 years ago out here than it is today, obviously. You can't pull out in 1880 one of these and go on YouTube and find any kind of music in the world like you can on Spotify. So, how did people get entertained in those days? What did you do for fun? So let's take a look at that. And how did entertainment change over time? There were several things that happened out here that caused a change in the way that people got entertainment and the way that they entertained each other and themselves. One of them was technology. Another was changes as far as society was concerned, how communities evolved and became more sophisticated, or how they boomed and busted, like Tombstone and Bisbee did. This slide here is a vaudeville slide from the Grand Theater in Douglas in 1926. The gals on the left are the Aeroplane Girls. Aeroplane is an A-E-R-O plane, a year before Lindbergh went to Paris. So, the earliest forms of entertainment out here, now consider Cochise County when it became Cochise County in 1881. Let's go back a few years before that to 1876. In 1877, when the Chiricahua Apaches went north, and when American and other folks came in here and started looking for valuable minerals and places to grow crops. So, how did people first entertain themselves? Young folks that came out here, young men, drinking and gambling. If you were at a mining camp on Goose Flats, or if you were in a mining camp up in the Mule Mountains, or if you were any place else in Cochise County, what were the forms of entertainment that you could take part in? You have a deck of cards, you could play poker. If you had a bottle, you could drink. There were no restaurants, there were no clubs, there were no saloons. It was self-entertainment, and it was very primitive entertainment. Now, who was out here? Young men. Who were the people that get into trouble more than anyone else in the world? Young men. What the FBI calls the at-risk population. So, we all know, and this is part of the story that's both legend and fact. People drank a lot 140 years ago. Drank a lot more than they did today. And saloons were open just about any hour of the day, and you could find men in them drinking. So this was the primary form of entertainment in the roughest form of a mining camp, was alcohol and cards. And it was like that all the time. Now these are more sophisticated bar over there, but if you had been out here in the very earliest days of Tombstone or Bisbee or Harshaw or Paradise or Galeyville or any of the camps, mining camps out here, you would have seen very primitive types of saloons, maybe a couple of barrels with a long board over it as a bar in a tent. And as time goes on, if the camp continues to exist, it becomes more sophisticated as more people move in. And you also get, of course, more money coming into town. And money brings a different form of entertainment. And of course, saloons were male-only sanctuaries. Any woman that went into a saloon was there for one purpose only. And this was the way that it was, and this is also why a lot of women became avid temperance proponents. Their husbands are in there getting drunk, doing God knows what, and they can't go in, and their kids can't go in. It's a boys' club. It's a sanctuary for men to get basically drunk and spend all their money. That's Swartz Saloon in Charleston on the left. And that fellow over there is a guy named Martin Costello, who owned a saloon in this town. And in 1899, he sold a mining claim in Bisbee called the Iron Mag to the Lake Superior and Southwestern Development Company for $500,000. So if Mr. Costello has a smile on his face in that picture, that's for a good reason. Now, you can't forget women, and women had their own forms of entertainment on the frontier. And one of the things that they did was just get together in informal groups, social clubs, charities, churches, lodge auxiliaries, the same kind of things that women do today, they did back in those days. And most of their activities, except for perhaps going to church, were separate from men's. So women had their thing and men had their things. That's the Women's Club in Wilcox. Anybody from Wilcox? Their women's club went back to 1911. And one of the things that women found in the very earliest days was that if you lived in an isolated place, you could go slowly mad from not having any female companionship, anybody to talk to and relate to. So as time went on, there were more and more women's clubs, and you can find the remnants of women's clubs all over, for example, Sulphur Springs Valley, the Webb's Women's Club. There used to be one out on Frontier Road. So McNeil had a women's club that Amelia Earhart dropped in on when her airplane engine malfunctioned. And people entertained themselves. If you had the ability to play a musical instrument 140 years ago, you were a popular guy, even if you were obnoxious, because you could shut up and play your musical instrument. If you knew how to play guitar or a piano or a Jew's harp or a harmonica, you had an audience. Now consider this, there was no other way to hear music other than to hear somebody perform it. The technology still did not exist in the 1880s to provide recorded music. If you went to a music store, you didn't find records, you found sheet music as well as musical instruments. People would take their sheet music home, put it on the piano, and if you could find somebody with a piano, and you had yourself a performance, a concert. As time went on, and as communities matured in the West, you started seeing different forms of entertainment developed. Economies would become more sophisticated. There'd be business communities, there'd be professional communities in the town, there'd be lodges, there'd be social organizations, there'd be churches built. And suddenly the entertainment gets more sophisticated. And also, as communities become more prosperous, money attracts entertainers. Always has, always will. If you want to see quality entertainment, you don't go to Tombstone anymore. You go to Tucson or Phoenix, and you pay $200 to go to an Indian casino and watch some aging 70s rock star perform or whatever. This is, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we knew those people back then when we had hair. So people demanded a higher form of entertainment. This was the case in Tucson, it was the case here in Tombstone, it was the case in Bisbee and Douglas. As the towns develop, people want more and better forms of entertainment. And there's a couple of things going on that made it possible to bring that entertainment out here. One was communications. Originally, if you wanted to establish a gig or set up a gig in a town, you had to write to the town, to whoever had a place like Schieffelin Hall or the Birdcage Theater or the Orpheum Theater or the Grand Theater, and you had to find out through lengthy communications that took sometimes weeks or months to transpire, when's the date available, when can I come out, how much is it going to cost? But that became a lot easier and convenient and faster because of telegraph. So suddenly you could wire somebody and say, I've got an empty date, I'm going to be out in that area, I would like to book my act into your establishment. What's the rates? What do you have available? So that made it easier. The other thing that made it easier, transportation got much more convenient and cheaper when the railroads came through. For example, Tucson in the 1870s, no professional artists of any sort came to Tucson, the biggest city in the territory of Arizona, or biggest city in southern Arizona. Not a single professional entertainer. But as soon as the railroad got close to Tucson, it's out. You started seeing high quality entertainment. As soon as the railroad got close to Tombstone, same thing. So when you have reliable transportation, you have communications so that you can establish bookings and get your act into place and know when to be there and how much it's going to cost, all of a sudden you've got the ability to have professional entertainers go all over. And they did. The first professional act to come out here was this lovely young lady, Nellie Boyd. I just finished reading a master thesis biography of her, and she was a fascinating lady. She came to Tombstone November 29th, 1880. So before that, there were some vaudeville acts that came out here. They called them novelty acts at the time. And it was pretty risque, cheesy entertainment, where somebody would come on stage and do some Irish brogue, somebody would come on stage and do some slapstick comedy, but it wasn't real quality entertainment. And then when the railroad came through, this lady made contact. She was a fascinating person, and I'm going to tell you a few biographical stories here about the entertainers, because what she did, she sang, she did a little comedy, but it was mostly singing and drama. She was a great actress. She was a good singer. She started in New York City and made her bones there. Then she moved to Chicago and worked in theaters over there. She formed her own troupe in 1876 and toured the Midwest. And she could have continued doing that, but this is a lady that had adventure in her soul. She was also recruiting other entertainers for her troupe that had adventure in their souls, because to come out to this part of the country back in the late 1870s and early 1880s, you had to be an adventurous person, especially a woman. What made her remarkable was that she was the leader of this troupe. For a woman to tour the West and be the head of her own theatrical troupe was a very uncommon thing. And this little lady had moxie. She came here in 1880, and she also came back in 1881. And what made her very popular wherever she went, whether it was Tucson or Phoenix or El Paso, San Antonio, because she toured the whole West, was that she was a very nice person. She wasn't a stuck-up entertainer, I'm doing this for you, so pay me and I'm out of here. When the amateur Tombstone Theater Troupe needed some scenery for a play they were putting on while she was here, which was from November 29th, I think, till December 16th. So she put on play after play after play in this theater. She said, you need scenery? No problem. You can use our scenery. In Tucson, when the Episcopal Church needed sheet music for a performance, they dug into their trunks and found sheet music. She made friends wherever she went. And what's the good side of making friends when you're an entertainer is that people ask for you back later on. Smart move. And this was the route that all entertainers took. This was the circuit, whether or not, and Nellie Boyd did not belong to a booking agency. She didn't have somebody doing this for her. She did all the legwork herself, she and her advance person and her business agent. So she followed the same circuits, but she booked herself and remained independent. She was not part of any kind of a large group of entertainers that's all operated by a central controlling entity. So these were the routes that she took. These are the same routes that everybody else took. And what do they follow? Railroads. That's how you got around. But when you get to a place like southern Arizona or central Arizona, if she was going to perform at Tip Top, or she was going to perform in Tucson, or Tombstone, you go as far as you can. You get off the train in Benson, and you take the stagecoach to get here. What's the problem with that for an entertainer? It's not just you. It's not just your troupe. It's a whole bunch of scenery and costumes and all the other stuff that you need to keep your act self-sustaining going all the way across the West. So you can imagine the work that her advance man had to do, the guy that would come to the town early, make arrangements for advertisement, make arrangements for hotels, make arrangements, everything that needed to be done to keep that performing troupe in the town, safe and comfortable, and also to make friends with people in the community so that you're treated well and get people in to watch your performance. And these are the locations of Tombstone's various theaters over the course of the first few years, the boom period. Okay, we all know where Schieffelin Hall is, and everybody here know where Schieffelin Hall is? Good. Okay, right across the street in the parking lot was the Turnverein Hall, and we'll get to them in a little while. Ritchie's was right there, and that's the first place that Nellie Boyd performed. When she came back in December 1881, she performed here in Schieffelin Hall. First place was Ritchie's on 5th Street. Then, of course, the Crystal Palace. And once people realized in Tombstone that you can make money by booking acts in here, a lot of saloons started putting up their own stages and turning themselves into mini theaters. There's money to be made. And then the Birdcage and another theater close by there. So Tombstone had a lot of choices, but the top quality entertainment, the best place to go, the most comfortable place, and the place where everybody was respectable, right here. This was the top draw. Now, this fascinated me because this was a circus that came here early on. Now, where did they have to get off? The train, Benson. How did they get here? I would love to know the answer to that, because they didn't have circus wagons on that train to transport them here. So I'm just mystified. How do you get all the animals in your acts and all the equipment and everything else that you need for a circus? Guess you have to hire wagons. And these folks performed in Ritchie's Hall, which was a very small venue, about half the size of this. So can you imagine a circus act on a stage half the size? Okay, we all know where this is, right? Okay, do I need to describe? Bless Al Schieffelin, huh? And all the folks that worked with him to create this magnificent edifice, this world-class historical landmark. And it stayed in regular use until 1918 for performance venues. And bless the city's heart for allowing you guys and anybody else that needs to use this. This is a wonderful place. It is it's an international treasure. There's another act this is a fellow I want to tell you about because he was a fascinating man. His name was William Horace Needham Lingard. He was English. He came over here in the 1860s. He cut his teeth on New York variety shows and doing comedy. And Lingard, by the 1870s, and I'm sure he billed himself as the great Lingard, but other people started talking about him as the great Lingard also. His shtick was doing satire and comedy, but he also did a lot of his stuff in drag, and he was very good at it. He also did a song called Captain Jinks. Anybody heard that song? I'm Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines. I fed my horse on corn and beans. I teach young ladies how to dance, for I'm the pet of the army. That was his song. He wrote those lyrics. And there's Captain Jinks. That was on the sheet music that he wrote the lyrics for. And that's him both in drag and in fez. So he performed here twice. He performed all over the West. And just like, who was that fellow? The one that went in the mine shaft in Leadville. What was his name? The English playwright, and found his book cover outside the house. Oscar Wilde. Yeah, a little bit of Oscar Wilde and William Horace Lingard. Now, sleight of hand was another popular act. Anybody that was a credible magician could really make money doing magical acts out here, and this fellow was probably the best of them all. And Anton Zamlock was from Austria. Prestidigitation, sleight of hand. And it's not magic. It's just knowing how to get people to divert their attention so that you don't see what they're doing with their hands. This guy went all over the American West, into Canada. He went to Hawaii, performed for David Kalakaua, the last king of Hawaii, and he came to Tombstone a couple of times. His son, Carl Zamlock, became a professional baseball player. He played for the New York Giants, and then he coached the University of California, Berkeley Bears, and also did magic on the side because his dad taught him all of his tricks. So, can you imagine watching magic acts in Schieffelin Hall? Watching girls be sawed in half, watching pigeons come out of top hats. That's what he did. Oh, wrong way, sorry. And then the Birdcage opened up. We all know about the Birdcage, and it's got quite a shady reputation, and some of that's deserved and some of it isn't. This is top quality entertainment. Birdcage is down here. It's variety, it's vaudeville, it's bawdy, it's risque, it's meant to be. And it was also a place where it had saloon girls working in it. And their purpose was not so much prostitution as it was getting people to buy drinks. Now, a few days ago in the Arizona Republic, there was a fellow that wrote a column, and it was right before Halloween, Arizona's wildest urban myths and legends. And of course, the Birdcage Theater was in there. And it is said 26 men were killed in the Birdcage Theater. And I thought, that's a bit much. There may have been one 1880s businessman that died of a heart attack when he got the 19th century equivalent of a lap dance. But has anybody else heard of 26 people being killed in the Birdcage? Okay. They did comedy, but it was called variety in those days, and it was kind of like burlesque comedy, blue comedy, kind of like, get the double meaning there? So it was a place where ladies did not go. They tried a ladies' night at the Birdcage once. That went over like a lead balloon. So the Birdcage was a place where if you wanted to go and hang out with the boys, but you don't want to take your wife, and if you want to have a girl with a low-cut dress and short skirt serving you cheap, watered-down drinks for high prices, that's where you went. And there's I don't know if that's Bignon or Bignon. I believe it's Bignon because they were Canadian, or he was Canadian. But they did a good job of managing that theater, so did Billy Hutchinson. And it had some good quality entertainment in it as well as the lowbrow stuff, but it was mostly lowbrow. Was it really a rowdy brothel? No. But has anybody been to Korea? Anybody been to a Korean bar or a Vietnamese bar? You buy me drinky, GI? That's the kind of place it was. It was young women, older women, according to a correspondent from the Tucson Citizen that went there. He said there were women of all kinds and all ages. And all of them dressed suggestively, and all of them trying to wheedle drinks out of all the men that were in there. That was their job. Baseball was here very early on. Baseball had really started becoming a national pastime when wire services started putting the box scores for baseball games in the newspapers. And with the telegraph, you could find out the score of your team, even if you're out here in Tombstone or Tucson or Arivaca or Oro Blanco or wherever. You could get the latest newspaper and find out how the teams were doing. Now, y'all have seen this picture. All you have to do is go over there to Allen Street and go into the Longhorn. Let's see. That's Chris Overlock's great-grandfather right there, Charles Overlock, first mayor of Douglas. They played Army teams, and the first baseball teams out here were Army teams. The first baseball game was played at Fort Bowie on Thanksgiving, I believe it was 1872, if I recall. And the Army and the Chiricahua Apaches got together and played vintage baseball. Well, I'd love to do that at Warren Ballpark.
You know who played first base with Chiricahua, right?
Who?
Yes.
No, I don't know. Who's on first?
Exactly.
That's one of the greatest comedy routines ever. Thank you. I finally got to be a straight man tonight. Okay, there were a lot of other sports out here too, and for example, Tombstone, and this would apply to any mining camp, cockfights, wrestling, boxing matches, all kinds of things. The other sport that was wildly popular in the American West was roller skating. Did y'all know that? All you had to do was put down a wooden floor. People were buying roller skates through the mail order roller skates and it's a cheap date. And this was the Turnverein, right across the street. German immigrants brought gymnastics to the United States. These were people that had been members of the Turnverein Society. Turnverein is German word basically for gymnastics. And when the Revolution of 1848 took place, a lot of those folks came to the United States to get away from political repression and the draft, and they brought their sports with them. So in Tombstone in 1880, That parking lot over there was the Turnverein Society's lodge. They would, just like Schieffelin Hall today, it's rented out for people to use for special events. Okay. We're historians. We don't do the legend thing. But think about it. 1929, Bisbee steals the county seat. What's left here? This was in danger of drying up and blowing away. And if some very resourceful, smart people hadn't gotten together in 1929 and said, what do we do now? Let's reinvent ourselves. Let's play on the legend. And the legend brings tourists here. The legend brings money to town. The problem is that some people get the legend confused with history. And that's our job to straighten that mess out. Bisbee has been faced with the same thing. 1975, when the mine shut down, our mayor, Chuck Eade, said, we have two choices. One is either become Jerome, and the other is to reinvent ourselves like Tombstone. So smart mining towns, when the boom turns to bust, get your tourists. Now, Bisbee grew from 1877, the same time that mineral was discovered here. Mineral was discovered up in the Mule Mountains. It took a few more years because copper is not as lucrative a mineral. But in a short period of time, Bisbee also turned into a mining camp and went from a mining camp to a mining town to a modern industrial city. And this is the difference. Copper continued to be produced in Bisbee for almost 100 years. Silver didn't last nearly that long in Tombstone, but there was a mountain of copper, and that copper continued to be produced until 1975. Bisbee was the same way as Tombstone, drinking and gambling, earliest entertainments, and then came permanent buildings, then came commercial districts, then came all the sophistication that a modern town has. This was Bisbee's Opera House. And if you've ever been in Bisbee and you go up above City Park, there's an Opera Drive. That's at the very end of that street. There's a vacant lot, and that's where that big white building was. And that was the original venue for mass entertainment, live entertainment in Bisbee. The Opera House really was an opera house. And there is the Andrews Opera Company, direct from Minneapolis, Minnesota, toured the whole country, top-notch opera. 10 siblings, it was like the Trapp family on steroids, and they were all good singers. That's them doing the Mikado, in case the Japanese costumes didn't tip you off, it was Gilbert and Sullivan. That's obviously not Carmen. And ethnic humor was huge. Now consider, Tombstone, Bisbee, it doesn't matter where you went in the American West. If you were standing on a street and just being a mouse and listening, you would have heard all accents and all languages of Europe, because immigrants were coming out here like crazy to work in the mines and doing whatever else that immigrants did. They were the cheap labor. And so ethnic humor was what we did. Murray and Mack. Charlie Murray and Ollie Mack were professional entertainers, toured the whole country. These guys did from the East Coast to West Coast. They did Bisbee a number of times. Minstrel shows. Very, very popular form of entertainment in the 19th century. And it was a really bizarre way that white people looked at black people. Especially white people dressed up in blackface to look like black caricatures of black people. You know, you try to make sense of it, your head will explode. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it was like they had black minstrels too. Bert Williams, the guy that did The Preacher and the Bear, was a black minstrel and black vaudeville performer. But most black people didn't want to do this caricature crap. Yeah. So, and as you can see, those are white guys. And they show this is what they really look like. Look how clever they are. Now, it wasn't all caricature. This lady came to Bisbee twice, Tucson once. She went all the way around Europe and South America. She was one of the finest sopranos in the world. Her name was Cissy Aretta Jones. She was from Rhode Island, And she was compared to Adelina Patti, who was considered to be the best soprano in the world in the late 19th and early 20th century. So she was called Black Patti. She disappeared from history. You can't find anything about her in most places. I took some stuff to the Tucson Southern Arizona African American Museum recently about her, and they're going to do an exhibit because she performed there too. She performed twice in Bisbee, and this is a lady with dignity and class. See all those medals on her chest? Those are medals that were given to her by people in Europe, South America. She would have commanded millions of dollars today. She disappeared into obscurity. Caruso's been recorded many times. There are no recordings of Cissy Retta Jones, because who wanted to record a black woman in 1900? But she appeared at the Bisbee Opera House in 1907 and then the Orpheum Theater in 1909. And that's the Orpheum. Now, if you've been to Brewery Gulch, you know there's a park in the entrance. Used to be a garage there. Well, this is what was there before anything else. This was the Orpheum Theater, built in 1909. This is where the best entertainment in the United States came to perform and by this time, Bisbee was awash in money. As wealthy as Tombstone was in the 1880s, that's nothing compared to what was coming out of Bisbee. And we were making people rich all over the country. Invest in Bisbee and get a lot of money back. That theater right there is now a park, and it's also, that held 700 people, and you put people in the balcony, 900, no fire escape. That's looking from the stage. And think of this, nobody in that crowd is wearing deodorant. Oh, yeah, the air conditioner was open to window. And this is one of the fascinating finds, one of the most interesting things that we've discovered about entertainment in Cochise County so far. 1909, a couple of fellas came from California. One of them's name was Roscoe Conklin Arbuckle, and the other's name was Walter Chapman Reed. This is not the Walter Reed that was the man that found the cure for yellow fever and all that. This was a vaudeville entertainer. These guys came from California. They were supposed to be booked for 1 week at the Orpheum Theater doing musical comedy. They wowed the crowds at the Orpheum so much that they held them on for 7 months. And these guys were there until after Christmas. They started in May and stayed till after Christmas. Then they went to Globe and then back to California. And the guy on the right, he became a movie star. In 1918, Roscoe Conklin Fatty Arbuckle was the second biggest box office draw in the United States after Charlie Chaplin, doing slapstick comedy, a lot of it in drag. You should see Miss Fatty's Seaside Romance. It's on YouTube. It's hilarious. And Walter Chapman Reed, he was his ethnic second banana. He also did movies, but Fatty fell into hard times in 1921, went to a party in a hotel in San Francisco. A woman died, and Fatty was put on trial for a murder, acquitted, but his career was ruined. But every time I go past that park where the homeless people get their lunches, I think of Fatty Arbuckle. Top quality entertainment. And baseball was a big hit in Bisbee. That's Warren Ballpark. Those are sliding pants because all the fields out here in the 1890s and early 1900s. You want to get that out of my rear end there, please? This was one of the major changes as far as entertainment was concerned, because until Edison came up with a very primitive cylinder recording device, the only way you get music was doing it yourself or having somebody else do it in front of you. All of a sudden, you can bring the best music in the world. Sound quality is not quite as good, but wow, what a thing to have in your house. And what a thing to impress your neighbors with. And these are the different companies. So you've got Columbia, Brunswick, and Victor. Shellac Records, 78 speed. And then movies came. I did not know this. 1897, somebody got off the train in Wilcox and showed an Edison movie. And then in 1898, they showed movies in Tucson and Bisbee, 1898. Just little snippets of stuff, but it just absolutely floored people. Oh my God, they're moving on stage. That's real people. Just blew people away. And it was like waving crack in front of an addict. People loved it. We still love movies. Come on. This was the Edison invention. This is the Lumiere brothers. They're the ones that really did the best in terms of movie projection equipment and cameras in the early days. And photoplays, movies, became a huge game changer. Before this, live entertainment, you went to a theater to see people perform. They started showing little clips between acts of movie clips. Just like 5 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 30 minutes, and then the movies got longer and more sophisticated, and pretty soon the movies became the most important thing, and the live performances, not so much. So we start seeing a big diminishing of live entertainment and a whole lot more movies by 1910, 1915, 1920. Vaudeville was almost gone. In the Grand Theater, if you've ever been down to Douglas to G Avenue and you see that big old theater, the one that doesn't have a roof and the one that's just a shell now, that was an incredibly beautiful movie palace when it was built. It had tea rooms. It had people who would stand outside and open the doors. They had ushers in opulent uniforms. This lady, you probably have seen her in movies with Fred Astaire. That's Ginger Rogers, and she was on the Keith vaudeville circuit in 1924 when she was booked to dance at the Grand Theater. Well, I'd love to have seen that. That's the way it looked on the inside. Now it's just a shell. The Lyric opened in Bisbee, and that's the one that's right as you come into town off the Highway 80 ramp, and you'll see that theater there. That was a top quality theater, and it showed live entertainment, but the live entertainment decreased as time went on. And that theater closed. Well, we used to go see whatever was playing there, whether it was Rocky V, Police Academy 3. It was just going to the movie and seeing who was there, small town movies. It's been closed for a while, and it's going to be turned into a hotel, maybe, possibly. I hope that they keep it in the same condition that it's in now. All towns had some kind of theater. Bowie had an opera house. Now, I don't think opera ever came there, but if you wanted to have a little quality, you called your little theater an opera house. So you could probably go any place in the Southwest to the most rural, rude, backwater town, and they'd have an opera house, even though opera never played there. Benson had lots of saloons. Railroad towns were rowdy places, just as rowdy as mining towns. And on 4th Street in Benson, there were all kinds of theaters there, and then on the other side of the tracks was where the girls were. That's where the term "the wrong side of the tracks" came from, by the way. And that fellow right there is John Norton. He ran Norton's Opera House in Wilcox. And he also ran the Wilcox Commercial, that beautiful building on Railroad Avenue. That's the Fashion Saloon. Wilcox Railroad Avenue was loaded with saloons, but it also had live entertainment. The circus came to Wilcox and to Benson, but these people wisely, this was before 1903, said, we're not taking our animals to Tombstone. Outdoor concerts were a big deal in those days too. Even after recording machines, record players, phonographs were available because the quality of music was so good. This is military bands in Castro Park, Church Park, and Douglas. And you would have had concert bands here in Bisbee. Bands would have come over from Fort Huachuca. Every town had their own band in those days because you made your own music. And a lot of Wild West and rodeos. So Wild West shows were shows that would come in from other places and do their thing and then go on. And rodeos, there were two kinds of rodeos. The rodeo for tourists, and then there was the cowboy competition to see who could stay in the saddle and who could and do all the things that ranch hands do to show off their skills. Railroads provided holiday excursions. That's the way people used to go down to Lewis Springs or someplace else along the San Pedro River and picnic. They'd take the train down there. That all changed too in 1908 when Henry Ford rolled out the Model T. All of a sudden, people started driving in their own cars. Railroads were no longer used. We became more independent, more mobile, and it changed our forms of entertainment. And of course, public hangings are well attended too. And who holds the record for mass hangings? Yay, Tombstone, we're number one, right? Yep. 1,000 people attended that, another 1,000 people supposedly on rooftops watching. Prohibition was a game changer. Arizona went dry 5 years before the country did, January 1st, 1915. And of course, everybody stopped drinking, right? Okay. So where did you go to legally drink? Naco, Sonora, Agua Prieta, Sonora became huge tourist destinations, also places where locals would go over and have a drink. Rodeo, New Mexico became a bootlegger's paradise because New Mexico was still wet when Arizona went dry. So there were people that advertised in Bisbee and Tombstone newspapers. Phone your order ahead before you come to rodeo and we'll have it waiting for you. And border towns had all kinds of entertainment. Naco and Agua Prieta had their own bull rings and the houses of prostitution, which we'll get to shortly. And then the other form of entertainment during the Mexican Revolutions, people would drive their cars from Bisbee and go down and watch Mexicans kill each other in Naco. They would stand on rooftops in Douglas and do the same thing and occasionally get shot. Now, Prohibition comes in 1933. We have a new form of entertainment. It's called nightclubs. Before that, you had saloons. After saloons became bars. And these were legal roadhouses. And yeah, you recognize it? Yeah. Do you know what? Billboard magazines, they did a yearbook every year in 1944. The two top places in Cochise County for musicians to get gigs were the Bright Spot and Gay 90s. And all of a sudden, technology changes things again, because not only can you get music and entertainment on your record player or going to a theater or going to a club, you could also turn on your radio, let the vacuum tubes heat up, and listen to the sound of Rudy Valley or the Coon Sanders Nighthawks or Duke Ellington, or listen to the news, or a prize fight, or a baseball game. Now, Cochise County didn't have any radio stations until 1933, but fortunately for us and the rest of the world, Los Angeles, Oklahoma City, and other large cities in the Midwest and on the West Coast, after dark, the FCC said, crank that power up, and you could get AM radio out here if you had the right equipment and you had a good antenna and you put your fillings and you had. But hey, it's magic. It's words coming through the air. This was the first radio station, KSUN in Lowell. And it was an AM radio station. It was 150 watts during the daytime, 250 at night. So you could get them in all over this part of Cochise County. That fellow right there is doing some entertainment, and you probably have heard of him. His name was Ettore Ted DeGrazia. And at that time, he was managing also the Lyric Theater for the Diamos family, who he married into in Bisbee. And then Douglas got a radio station in 1947. And that was Bisbee's and Douglas's baseball team's name. The same animal that tips over your garbage played baseball at Warren Ballpark and Copper King Stadium. Prostitution, the world's oldest profession. It was here in Tombstone, you know where the red light district was? It was in Brewery Gulch. It was on Green Street in Douglas. It was in Wilcox. It was in Benson. It was everywhere because there were so many single men out here. You had the market, you had the demand, and you had the supply. But the biggest, the rowdiest, bloodiest house of ill repute in all of Cochise County, and I defy Tombstone to prove it otherwise, was on the west end of Sierra Vista, White City. on Garden Avenue. Property owned by the Carmichael family was rented out to brothel owners who set up houses of ill repute and saloons for the Buffalo Soldiers on Fort Huachuca. This went on for years. These places would be closed because of the killings and all the violence that took place. The sheriff would close them. They'd pop right up again. The provost marshal would close them. They'd pop right up again. And that's because nobody ever busted the Carmichaels and the Frys for renting out the property that it was on. So this went on until 1942, until the Army decided to greatly expand Cochise, Fort Huachuca, and all the white folks came into the area, and all of a sudden it went from being White City to Fry. That's a fascinating story. That's Daisy Mays right there. That was a house of ill repute. Yep. That was the original White City, and then there were all kinds of other buildings and brothels out there, and they were all painted white, hence White City. County Board of Supervisors sends a formal letter to the post commander of Fort Huachuca, close this place down. So he does. He sends a letter to the Board of Supervisors saying, close this place down. So they do. This happened many, many times, and it kept springing back to life. Now, during World War II, Fort Huachuca was expanded from a garrison of 800 to 30,000. Now, obviously, White City is not going to be able to take care of that demand. So, where's your best supply of love for sale? Naco, Sonora. And that's where that big red light district, if you drive all the way to the end of Naco, Sonora, you're going to find a whole bunch of crumbling adobe buildings sitting out in the middle of nowhere. That's the Zona de Tolerancia, the red light district. They entertained more troops in that red light district than Bob Hope did during World War II. Now, other forms of entertainment existed in Fry. African-American community and some white people got together and they formed a service club for the black servicemen off post that was called the Green Top because it had a green roof on the building. Also had some really cool murals in it. Go to the Henry Hauser Museum, the whole story of this place. It's not a story that Sierra Vista is proud of, but it's history, and we need to make sure it's told and told honestly. And then TV came. Now, there was no TV. There was TV in Tucson in the 1950s. There was TV in Phoenix. No TV in Cochise County. And you couldn't get a decent signal here because of the mountains, direct, TV's an FM signal, and you could not get the line of sight signal. So how do you solve that problem? In Bisbee, they came up with, it was the first community, not just one of the first, it was the first community cable system in the United States, was in Bisbee, Arizona. So in conclusion, how entertainment, how people got their pleasure, how people amused themselves changed over time as communities here went from being rude mining camps to towns to cities, changed it, technology changed it, social structures as they changed, the entertainment changed as well. And it's still changing today, which is why we have this and people listening on earbuds, the entertainment comes directly to you now instead of you having to go anywhere else. But things have changed, and they'll continue to change. But here's one thing I want to leave you with. Don't forget all the people that sat on those benches or benches like these 140 years ago and watched and listened to the Wallace sisters and Nellie Boyd and all the other great entertainers that appeared on the stage here, right there, in Tombstone, Arizona, on the stage in the Orpheum, and on the stage of the Grand Theater in Douglas, and all the other great places. So thank you.